Hey, my name's Chris from Create Daily, and today I'm here to give you a videographer's perspective on the Sony 7200 G Master Mark II. So let's check it out. I'm just going to cut to the chase here before we jump into the review. This is a lens only worth buying if you plan on making money with it. If you're a freelancer, a business, or if you do paid gigs and you want a top-of-the-line 70-200 telephoto lens, well, this is definitely the right choice to make. I do a combination of sports, weddings, portraits, and random gigs from time to time, which is why I decided to get my own. At the time of making this video, this lens cost nearly $3,000 USD, and that is a lot. There are other 7200s I could have purchased, so let me explain why I went with this one. There's that one saying, you get what you pay for, and boy does that ring true with this piece of glass. If you've used other 7200s before, you'll quickly be able to tell that this lens is built different. Let me explain. This lens is 1 pound lighter than its predecessor while still being a sharper lens. This lens is also weather sealed, giving you the ability to use it in questionable conditions. It is a G Master lens after all. Unlike other 7200s, this lens doesn't have a turtleneck when you zoom in or zoom out. This lens has the best lens hood I've ever had before too. I didn't expect to notice that, but I wanted to point that out as well. Let's talk about how you should set this lens up from a videographer's perspective. You'll see here we have 3 customizable buttons. We have one on the top of the lens, one on the side, and then one on the bottom. And to be honest, I don't use these as much. I see photographers using these customizable buttons more, but if I were to set these up for what I regularly need, which is more of a run and gun shooter style, I would set these up for focus area, peaking, grid line. I've heard of some videographers using these for the record button. So get crazy with it, see what suits your needs most, but I usually leave these alone. Next, let's go to the switches here on the side of the lens, all along here. So first we have the autofocus and manual focus switch. I shoot a lot in auto, so I'm going to leave that to on. Next, I have full-time DMF. I'm going to leave this to on. So what this feature does is when you're in autofocus with the full-time DMF on, even though I'm shooting in auto, I could still manually adjust my focus while in autofocus. So I see that being the best of both worlds. Next is our autofocus limit switch. I would leave it at full. Next, we have these 2 other switches which actually coincide with one another. So we have our OSS, or optical steady shot, and this should only be on when you're shooting handheld, okay? When you have your camera on a tripod that has in-body image stabilization and the switch is on, you could run into some major issues with your footage looking wavy and looking like you put a warp stabilizer on it and it looks really funky. So only leave this on when you're shooting handheld. So for the next switch, you have 3 modes. First is for standard, the second one is for panning, and the third one is for moving subjects. You'll need to use the one that suits the needs for what you're shooting handheld. So for standard, you could use it for anything. That's what I will probably leave mine at. But if I were shooting something like race cars or motorcycles or jet skis or something like that, I would probably switch it to mode 2, which is panning. And then third, for moving subjects, that I would use for wildlife. Or if I'm shooting like eagles or things that are moving around a ton, maybe even for sports games, I would actually use this for mode 3. So try things out, but this is how I would set up my buttons. Now let's talk about the focal range. If you plan on shooting on a 70-200, you plan on shooting from a distance. Keep in mind, if you go into APS-C mode, you get a 1.5 times crop, making your 70-200 a 105-300, which is a pretty significant change if you ask me. I filmed a professional lacrosse game with this lens and got every shot I needed when I was outside the glass. I've used this lens in every wedding I shot this past year, and it did not disappoint. I was able to get quality shots of the bride without obstructing anyone's view or experience. I didn't run a specific autofocus test, but from using this lens in 2 very different types of shoots, I had 0 issues with autofocus while pairing this with my A7 III. So you learned about the build, what I love about it, the buttons, the switches, all the different modes, and honestly, you got to see my real life experience with it. So what next? You're probably still on the fence. Is this lens still really worth nearly $3,000? Well, let me just give you my honest advice about this piece of gear and any gear for that matter. Just like any piece of expensive gear you're thinking about buying, you should rent it first. I rented this lens several times before buying it. 1, because I couldn't afford it at first, and 2, because I wanted to make sure that spending all of this money was going to be worth it. And for me it was, which is why I ended up buying it. Let me know what you think in the comments about the Sony 70-200 G Master Mark II. Thanks for watching.